Welcome to the show. It's the Desert Rat Real Chat with your hosts Beef and Jorge. We're just a couple of dudes from Tucson, Arizona who enjoy watching TV shows and movies and love talking about it afterwards.
If you want to interact with the show, leave a comment below. Quick disclaimer, we do not claim to be professionals of the film industry. We just have our 2 cents to share.
So, Jorge, what are we talking about today?
Today we're discussing Star Wars TV show Andor Season 2, episodes 7 through 12. So, spoiler alert for all of Andor plus Rogue One. This is a follow up to our last episode where we discussed episodes 1 through 6. Today we'll be sharing our overall thoughts, specific things we liked or didn't like, and then questions we have about the show. So, Beef, start us off. What'd you think?
I gotta say, Andor might be one of my favorite shows of all time. It's just there's so much attention to detail. The writing was so good. You really felt the storylines of everyone coming together. It was a masterpiece of a show. Just a wow, chef's kiss. Just awesome ending. So like we were gonna watch. I was like gonna watch one episode at a time, but I really could not like stop watching after I started watching an episode. I needed to watch the rest of it and just finish it, just because it was so
Yeah.
gripping, right?
Well, then, if it was so gripping, how come you didn't have the urge to just start watching Rogue One right away?
Because I was neglecting work and I didn't needed to needed to do some work. um,
Well, look, I mean, I think you and I are going to agree on a lot of things about what the show got right.
mhm,
I don't know that it's going to be one of my favorite shows of all time
mhm,
because um, it doesn't necessarily stand on its own. Like you kind of need the context of the greater Star Wars universe to understand what's at stake
mhm.
and where this is kind of all leading to. But for sure, this is going to be one of my favorite Star Wars TV shows of all time. Just doing a quick shout out to Breaking Bad. I think that's still one of my favorite TV shows of all time. I mean, Andor, I can totally understand why you would want this to be your favorite show.
Yeah, there's just so much like if you haven't yet already, you should go watch some Easter egg videos because there's just so much thought put into a lot of the set design and like just like bringing in other elements of the Star Wars world into just random things that you see in the background. So for example, like Luthen's
Yeah.
store, right, his antiquity store, like a lot of the items in the background are pieces that take imagery from various other Star Wars mentions and whatnot. So like there's like
Hmm.
symbols from the Force and other movies that are there. But I'm not here to talk about all those intricate details and Easter eggs. You can look those up in a YouTube video. But
Well, yeah, but so quick two comments on that. Number one, those Easter eggs are very appreciated, and I have a lot of fun watching a YouTube channel called Screen Crush. They do all the Easter eggs,
yeah, I think that's the
and
one I
it's
watched
it's a
too.
lot of fun to see. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
a lot of fun to see
yeah.
like all the Easter eggs they put in there, but it's not necessary for the story,
No,
right?
no,
So
no.
you don't have to get those Easter eggs in order to appreciate the storyline.
Mhm.
But the other thing that you made me think of is the little details that they put in. And one of the things that I loved about the Andor finale is that Deidre confronts Luthen with the Star Path unit, which is the same unit that was stolen all the way back in season one by Andor. That's kind of how Luthen recruits Andor. So to me, I thought it was brilliant writing that they kind of brought it full circle,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And because remember, Deidre has been obsessing about access, obsessing about the fact that there's like this coordinated effort to bring down the Empire. And this was like the one thing that she could have brought with her that we would recognize that we knew is what Luthen was after. And so it was really cool to that the writers decided to do that as how they were going to catch Luthen.
Yeah, it's super well done, right? Like there's 12 episodes in the finale, but they're released 3 at a time, and then in between each of the sets of 3, a year passes by. And so we feel the mounting, climax of getting to essentially a new hope, right? So like Yavin and whatnots. And so this kind of build up to that was like really cool, but also it had its own mini build up of the whole like Dedra finding Axis, finding Luthen, sort of thing. So when she
Mm-hmm.
when she took out that unit, I was like, oh wow, is that actually the same one from season one? Even though it'd been a while since I'd seen season one, but I remembered that unit. Like I haven't seen season one. I really should have rewatched it before watching season two, but I haven't seen it since it came out, and really enjoyed it back then. But there are a lot of finer details of season one that I did not remember at all. But I remembered that unit that she took out. I was like, oh dang,
Yeah.
that is like the thing
Well,
that started it all.
yeah, and that brings up a really good question. Like, did she just have this like somewhere for herself, or did she have to ask like one of her ISB's officers, like, "Hey, go to the evidence room, grab article 23-5, and bring I need to bring this with me," or did she have it personally?
I think
Right?
she keeps
Like,
it on
was
her
she so
nightstand.
obsessed?
It's like on her
Right?
nightstand.
Like,
She like
it's her
rubs it every
reminder. This is
night.
why I go to work.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah.
So, I, yeah, so you mentioned the fact that this is a total of 12 episodes and it's divvied up into four different time periods,
Yeah,
right? With
yeah.
with
A
each
year in
series
between.
of three episodes,
Hmm.
right? So a couple of things. Like, I thought it was really interesting that they did not do that in season 1,
Hmm.
right? So they're specifically choosing a different storytelling method, and I think that's really great. I think more TV shows need to kind of uh take a few risks
Yeah,
with how they tell the
experiment.
stories, and
Yeah,
I feel like they made it so purposeful. I feel like it wasn't just like, oh, let's just do 4 years and we'll just randomly break in between each one. No, like there was a story arc in between, in each year. And the thing that I appreciated is that the characters were not interacting with each other as if they've just seen each other the previous episode.
hmm,
Like, you could tell that some characters have spent time together or have spent time apart. And you can see how those characters are changing. And to me, that was just so brilliant how they figured out which characters to keep apart and which ones to keep together. Like, for instance, the one that stood out to me the most was Vel and Andor, because these are two characters who, as far as I can remember, spend a lot of time together in Andor season 1, right? They were very important characters in season 1. And then in this season, Vel was more of a side character,
hmm.
but they kept her away from Andor. And so when they finally came back together, I feel like it was a really meaningful moment where they're like, listen, Andor, my cousin, Senator Mothma, is telling me that you're coming up with these crazy theories. I need to hear it for myself, right? And so that I felt like they picked such a great moment in the story to actually reunite them. And you could tell that they haven't really spent much time together. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, their destinies have been like somewhat tangential to each other, but kind of like tied together by Luthen, who we'll probably talk more in depth about Luthen and his arc and his death and everything like that. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
bringing her in, like you said, the time skips are done really well, such that you feel that there's been a change, but you don't feel like you're like totally lost. You're like, oh, a year's gone by. Like, what has like I'm so confused because so much has changed, right? They do it really
Exactly.
really subtly, but really impactfully.
Yeah. And you know what? On top of on top of the time skips, also the use of flashbacks.
Hmm.
So, when I think of flashbacks that are done really poorly, I like to put up their Book of Boba Fett. I think their flashbacks were just so terribly done. It didn't make sense. It
Really
didn't. I
half-assed.
feel like it didn't really advance the story. Right. But in this season of Andor, the flashbacks were so well positioned
Hmm.
within the story to provide you the necessary context just as you needed it. So I think, to me, the best example of that is how they explain that Clea was a small girl who was rescued by Luthen.
100%.
You know what? I don't know what was going on. I don't know what war he was in. Like, it would be really cool to know, but to be honest, you don't need that. All you cared about is, you could tell Luthen was tired of fighting. There was a lot of murdering going on, apparently, and he decided to rescue Clea. And at that point, it becomes apparent that she's not just some assistant. This is like his adopted daughter.
Hmm.
And more so than that, almost like a soldier. I think a lot of like kind of like the Black Widow program in Marvel. You know how that from a young age they train them to become, lethal. I feel that Luthen not only adopted her but started her training early. He was not a, a empathetic father. Oh, come here, I'll take care of you. No, he was rough and tough, and it was all about survival and all about the mission. Even then, so what I liked is that they used that flashback to grow their relationship at a moment where it was most needed,
Hmm.
because that's the episode where Clea kills Luthen.
Yeah.
So it's not just like, oh, I need to kill him because he's a loose end. No, I'm his daughter, and this is really really freaking hard for me to do. But the mission goes first. Like, holy smokes! Like, what a way to just put a lot of emphasis and significance behind what is happening right there and what she's choosing to do. Mind you, there's no one on the radio telling her, "Oh, you need to go kill Luthen because he's a loose end." No, she just understands the problem of him being alive. And that is incredible. Because at first I thought there might be a rescue mission. I don't know if that was her intent at first,
Hmm.
but when she decides to kill him, I was like, wow, what a soldier.
Yeah, no, that I
Like,
think
wow.
that episode might be my favorite episode of the whole season. It's just super impactful. Like you said, the flashbacks in Book of Boba Fett, every single time they had a flashback, it just left me frustrated and confused. But this one, the flashbacks are done so well because it's juxtaposed with her going on the mission, right? We see a little bit of flashback and then we see her on the mission. And we see a little bit of flashback. Like we're going back and forth between past and present, and as an audience we kind of know where this is leading, right? It's like we haven't had a lot of information about Luthen and Clea's history, like what is their relationship, like is she just his assistant? But this really helps strengthen that like emotional bond that we feel between the two of them, and really hit home like how difficult of a mission she's on, based off of their history, right? Like, and it both
Yeah.
justifies what she does, but also makes it very, very difficult to bear. And so there's so much emotion that goes into this. And what's also really significant is when she does this, right? Like when she kills him, and then she cries some tears and she kisses him. The episode ends in such a significant, crazy way where we just see a shot of Luthen by himself, right? In like room's all white, but then the camera just fades out, and that's like it really brought me back to Revenge of the Sith with Anakin when he was in that dark room on the medical table, similar to what Luthen is here, right?
Oh,
And the
yeah, yeah,
like
good point.
the overarching theme has been Luthen's given so much for the rebellion, right? Cassian Andor
Yeah.
yells at that the I guess the leadership team on Yavin. He's like he's sacrificed so
Mhm.
much. No one here has sacrificed even a portion of what he's done, right? And he said a quote I think in the first season where he's like I'm fighting for a sun to rise that I'll never get to see, right? And that really hit home in that he's dying alone, kind of forgotten. A lot of the rebels on Yavin despise him for what he's done, but they don't realize like the impact that he's had in the world. And so it's such a
Yeah.
powerful moment because you not only feel the emotion of her losing her essentially father that adopted her, but
Hmm.
also someone who's probably the most significant character of the whole series, right? Like just
Yeah.
based off of what he's done.
I love how Rogue One and now Andor have expanded the story where you start realizing how important just a minute character in the universe has really become, right?
Mhm.
So Rogue One shows like, okay, where did the Death Star plans come from? So then you learn about the Rogue One team, like, wow, so if it weren't for them, you know, A New Hope never would have happened.
Yeah.
And then now you see that Luthen is largely responsible for how well the Rebel Alliance has grown, right? Because in season one, it was just kind of a bunch of different factions. It really wasn't an alliance. So it is really cool to see how like they keep peeling back the layers, and you're like, wow, like you get to see all the necessary steps that happen to get there. Now, while you were talking about Luthen and the reflection towards Anakin, but on a dark table becoming Darth Vader. The other thing that occurs to me is when you think about it, Luthen committed suicide. He wasn't successful when he presumably slit his wrist or stabbed himself,
Hmm.
but his intent was to commit suicide. And what came to mind when that happened, I said, "Wow, Luthen is not only talking the talk, but he's walking the walk. He demanded of everyone else the same. He killed Lonnie, the spy.
Hmm. Yeah.
He was a loose end. He ended up killing. He killed Tay Kolma, right? The friend of Mon Mothma,
Hmm.
and he was willing to kill himself to protect the mission. And I think that's quite admirable because there's not many other people that would do that.
Yeah.
And what occurs to me is that there's another parallel within the same story, and that is Partagas. Partagas also commits suicide, but he does it for selfish reasons because he does not want to face the consequences of what he's done or face the consequences of supporting this big empire that he's been helping out this entire time, right? So, whereas Luthen kills himself because he wants to protect the mission at large, Artigas kills himself because he wants to protect himself. He wants to avoid consequence,
Yeah. There's
right?
a lot of parallels
So,
here with like Hitler, right? So like some of the behind the scenes producers are like, oh, this whole like when these people meet and they talk about Gorman, it's based off of that one conference that Hitler had with his folks in the Alps, saying like, here's how we're gonna end the war,
oh,
right? So they're like, if you watch some
okay.
of the behind the scenes, they talk about a lot of the parallels with like essentially
Well,
likening
listen,
the Empire to the Nazis.
yeah, I don't think I have to watch those behind the scenes because when they did that summit with Krennic talking about Gorman,
Hmm.
I exactly thought that seems a lot like the planning meetings that happen in the Alps.
Yep.
And then
Yep.
when Partagas kills himself, I was like, that's kind of like Hitler in the bunker,
Yeah,
you
yeah, he
know?
shot himself, right?
So So I think they did a great job of communicating this. And I don't think that this is the first and only reference to other historical things. Let me point your attention to this would have been covered in our previous episode because it happened in before episode 7 when they're in the art gallery and Krennic and Mon Mothma are debating the massacres that
Hmm.
happened, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, there were rebels and there were insurgents and terrorists. Like, well, no, they were unarmed protesters and they were killed. All I could think of was like, wow, this sounds a lot like people debating the cause of the Civil War. Was it slavery or states' rights?
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
and to a different extent, I'm sure you could do the same thing with um, the war in Germany and in World War II, right? So like how you frame, what the motivations were for the war.
Yeah, they had some excellent writers who really understood a lot of the political, geopolitical, trends in history and really like reflected it here for a really good story for
Yeah.
sure.
I think overall Star Wars does a really great job when they have politics involved.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, uh, I think Bad Batch was another series that also involved a lot of politicking,
Hmm.
and I thought it was great. I loved those episodes where you kind of get to see the government at work or not working.
Yeah.
Um, you get hints of that in The Mandalorian. They talk about an ineffective law enforcement. And I was like, man, like these are all the reasons why the big trilogies work, because you have the Rebel versus the Empire, or in the new series, you have the New Republic fall against the First Order, So it's pretty cool to see kind of what the politics of each particular age and how they evolve.
Yeah, no, really well done. Um, Especially here in Andor, like they really focus on a lot of the intricacies of like just a lot of the things that get glossed over in some of the larger movies, just because there's so many other things. If they tried to fit this into a movie, it would be way too long, right? But we get to see all the
Yeah,
inner workings of the Empire, all the little cracks and crevices and dents and issues with both building a rebel alliance as well as trying to build and maintain an empire and have the empire have this grip on the people, right? Um,
yeah.
Yeah.
So, what did you think of Cyril and Deidre's relationship and how that changed, especially in the last half of the season?
Yeah, so that's a good discussion topic. So first of all, I will start with I was not expecting, let's just say in my mind it was statistically low that I thought that Cyril would die. I wasn't like, "Oh, he's definitely not going to die." But he certainly felt like a quote unquote main character, right? Like especially throughout season
Hmm.
1 for sure. Season 2 he took a little bit more of a backseat, but he still had quite a bit of screen time, right? And so I was not expecting
Hmm.
him to die. But after watching the rest of the season, I recognize now why he had to die, because I think what we started to see in Searle in that episode where Gorman like raises they like rise up, right? Is I think he's starting to, him and Dedra, right, are in this quote unquote relationship, or however you want to call it. But unfortunately she has to keep some secrets from him. But there's this
Yeah.
parallel with how like the Empire, like Krennic, Palpatine, are keeping secrets from Dedra too, right? And so there's this weird power
Right.
dynamic where she's trusting the Empire, like she's dedicated her life to the Empire, but then she gets betrayed by it. But in a way, like she was the first one to betray Cyril, because Cyril trusted her,
Hmm.
but then she kind of betrayed his trust. And so I think at the Gorman Uprising, I was starting to feel like, oh, Cyril is seeing, the true evils of the Empire, and he's starting to churn to the good side. And I thought for a moment
Yeah.
in my mind, right, knowing Star Wars and Dave Filoni and some of the really good writing that I've seen through some TV series, I thought he would change sides essentially, right? Like I thought there might have been a path for him to change sides. I think the writing there would have been a lot more difficult, because either he would have
Hmm.
either tried to convince Dedra to change sides, like she could have started to see the error of her ways, the Empire betraying her. Obviously, by the end of the show, right, we see her in a prison cell, right? She's like, at that point, she's just very seriously internally conflicted, right? Having dedicated her life to the Empire, but now she's imprisoned for trying to do the right thing, right? Um, but I could have possibly seen a path where Cyril changed sides and maybe either joined the rebels or was operating in this weird like gray area in between the Empire and the rebels.
Well, didn't he switch sides? I mean, he left the bunker, to he didn't like he didn't switch sides in the sense of, okay, I'm gonna pick up a gun and start shooting at the stormtroopers, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I do think he had a change of heart because he realized that, wait a minute, the things that the Empire is publishing is not true.
Yeah.
Like there is no dangerous rebellion here. Like there is no dangerous insurgency. Why do they keep saying these things? And then he sees how much security there is built up around this bunker.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the thing that really throws him over the edge is when they put him into that room with all those the KX units, the little robots. He realizes, wait a minute, they know they're about to unleash these robots. Like this is not a reaction. Like they're planning to release these robots. Um, and and so I think that's when he realized that it really was a sham. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was um, a propaganda war, basically. Uh, and yeah, that's why he doesn't, yeah, that's why he leaves the bunker. And to me, I think what drove him to madness was seeing Andor, right? And I really think that he rem- has been so either traumatized or focused on finding Andor,
Yeah.
right? Going back all the way to season 1, and he just had to confront him, and that's why I thought it was so poetic that Andor's like, "I'm sorry, who are you?"
Yeah, yeah. So
like,
I think he has like a
imagine this guy.
he's got like a programming in his
Go ahead.
brain that's like, if I see Andor, I fight and kill him, right? Even though he's like in this state
Yeah,
of state of daze, right?
yeah. And I really do think that had Cyril survived, he probably would have either left the ISB or tried to uh, not fight it necessarily. I think he's still loyal to the system.
Hmm.
I think he would try to figure out why was there, this false flag war, like why did this need to happen, and I think his trust in the system was absolutely broken down to its core, and he didn't know who he was anymore. He thought he was just another cog in a machine that is built for the people. I think he truly believed that, and in his last moments he was realizing that that was not the case, and that as a matter of fact that Deidre was a part of the problem because he basically broke up with Deidre,
Yeah.
you know and that's why, man, that episode was so great because I was just like, wow, like I didn't think Cyril was gonna turn his back on his girlfriend, like he's actually standing. I think this is probably one of the few times he's actually stood up for himself.
Yeah.
I might just say.
Yeah, he's always been like somewhat of a quote unquote pushover, right, when it comes to following orders.
Right.
Um, but I just love this episode and how like just so how masterfully done it was, right? The
Yeah.
whole episode is just the Gorman uprising and him essentially realizing like, hey, the Empire's been telling lies all this time. I've been lied to.
Yeah.
My girlfriend, wife, whoever she is to him has been lying to him. The Empire has been lying to him, right? It's all been a sham. And I really like how essentially this is showing that the truth brings out like goodness, right? Like evil tries to conceal the truth. And he, like you said, he does realize it. Yeah, it's kind of a gray area to me whether or not he quote unquote changed sides. Whether he did or not, he definitely did it too late, right? Like his realization here,
Hmm.
he's probably like, oh shit, like I've been on the wrong side for a while now. Like
Yeah.
I've been doing the wrong
But
thing.
you see, I mean, and that's the thing. Maybe the reason we're struggling to say whether or not he changed sides is because I think Andor is such a well-developed story that there really are no sides. There's multiple parties and they all have intertwining relationships with each other,
Hmm.
but they don't all line up, right? You've got Luthen on one side, you have Saw Gerrera on another, you have Mon Mothma on another, right? Like even on the good side, you still have different factions. Look at the ISB. You can clearly tell at the end of the series that Partagaz and Krennic had some sort of relationship or trust in each other that was separate from the other ISB commanders and lieutenants and whatever. And then you had the little smaller factions with the lower ranking ISB, right? So you had Lonnie, Hurt, and whatever the other guy's name is, Deidre, and they're all kind of competing with each other, and they all different reasons, right? Deidre is really focused on Axis, right? The whole Gorman thing was kind of thrust upon her, but you could tell even after that meeting that she was really wanting to stay on Axis.
Yeah,
And Partagaz was the one that was like, no, that's not your assignment. Focus on your assignment. And to be honest, if it weren't for her staying on top of Axis, she probably would not have been killed. Or
yeah,
I'm sorry, sent to prison. Um, because it was her like passion to go find this person that she would not have been caught red-handed and basically thrown away as a spy, which she wasn't. But again, I think that's why there's so much poetic justice in this series, right? Partagaz kills himself because he doesn't want to be arrested. Cyril drives himself to madness, ends up getting killed. Deidre, it ignores certain security protocols trying to find access, and as a result, gets tagged as a spy. Right? We all know Krennic doesn't have a happy ending. In the next year after
hmm,
the end of Andor. So like there's so many ways that just being on the bad side of things ends up getting you caught.
yeah,
But no, I don't think there's one side and another side. I think there's multiple sides, and that's why Cyril is doing what he does. And he maybe he is. Yeah, I still think he's a bad guy, but he was a blind follower,
yeah,
is what I think it was.
yeah. I think he was misguided, right?
Hmm.
But yeah, the fact that he died, in episode 8, like I said, was surprised that a quote unquote main character would die. But we are getting episode 8. We're getting near the end of the series, so Luthen dies. I was actually worried that Clea would die, right? Because I don't think she shows up at all in Rogue One, or at least not that I remember. So I
Mm.
was obviously
No,
like
she's a new
Andor.
character.
Andor, I'm like, oh, he's definitely not gonna die because he's in Rogue One. But for Clea, I was like, oh, please don't die. um,
So okay, so I do have some questions. There's a few things that were confusing about the story in general, or just the last 6 episodes.
sure.
So maybe you can help me. These are in no particular order, but just the order I wrote them down in.
All right, sure.
Um, why the heck did they rescue the robot K2SO? Like I like that. Just I felt like it came out of nowhere. Like he was trying to get the heck out of Dodge, and then this robot gets run over, and he's like, "Oh, this is a really good time to pick up this heavy thing and like burden
Yeah.
myself on the way out." Like I don't understand that. Why did that
It's
happen?
it's a plot element because he appears in Rogue One, and I like them writing this season. They were probably like, okay, shoot, we need to figure out how he ends up with Andor, with Cassian Andor, because
But they
K2SO's.
didn't. They didn't have to show that. Like they could have just left it be like, hey, that's one of those things that happens, right? Like or or what if like much earlier in the season they keep talking about like, hey, listen, like we really need to get ourselves an imperial droid either to steal their data or to do identity fraud or like to be able to sneak in, like just talk about it. And then when he sees the opportunity, he's like, "Oh my god, like I'm on my main quest right now, but this is a side quest, and I could get the achievement right now." You know?
Yeah, it is a super weird moment, right? When they get K2SO, because he's in the middle of like this uprising. If I was him, I'd be like, I want to get the hell out of here. I don't want to like, hey,
Exactly.
guys, help me carry this thing onto this. Yeah, that was definitely like a weird like, that plot element is a kind of weirdly written part. I understand why they had to bring him in, right? So basically, I think the end of episode 12 is supposed to literally be what like the same day that Rogue One
No,
starts
let me
or
let me
something like
tell
that.
you. So I did watch the first few minutes of Rogue One, and it goes into each other very well. You know, because at the end of episode 12, everyone's talking about like, hey, Saw has this dude on the rings of Kafrine. His name is Tivik, and or you got to go talk to him. Sure enough, Rogue One, it starts off with him on the rings of Kafrine, and the dude's name is Tivik, and I'm like, listen, like, what do you know? And then that's when he starts confirming all the things that Andor is trying to tell the Rebel Alliance. Tivik confirms all of that. So basically, they're hearing the same story from multiple angles,
Hmm.
which is where I think they can finally say, okay, this thing is the
Yeah,
Death Star is real.
yeah the stories match up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
All right.
this
So
is one of the behind the scenes thing that's related to what you just talked about. But basically, they paid a lot of attention to the soundtrack of season two, where in the beginning of season two, the music's more electronic, and then as it
okay.
goes up to episode 12, it slowly becomes more orchestral to be very similar to the soundtrack of Rogue One, to match the same sound
Wow,
signature. So if you really
that's
pay attention to the
amazing.
soundtrack, apparently that's what happens. I have not independently verified this, but these this the I guess the soundtrack, the score writers or the musicians or whatever, the people writing the soundtrack for it
Yeah.
paid special attention to that, which is really cool.
Well, then that's something that I'll have to pay attention to the next time I watch it again. Hey, how are we doing on time? What time are we at right now?
That's a great question. We're at 30 minutes.
30 minutes. All right. So do you want to field a couple more of my questions?
Yeah, sure. Let's. I think this is a good line of discussion. I mean, we
Okay.
hit the big
All
points
right.
for me at least, which was the Clea Luthen thing, and Cyril's death. Those were the main things I wanted to hit. But yeah, we can
Let
field
me
these
let me
questions.
see if there are any highlights from me. Um. um, yeah, I think. Oh, actually, I do want to say one thing. Um. Another cool story, r- just how they wrote the story when they're trying to rescue Mon Mothma from the Senate
Hmm.
and trying to get her out.
Yeah.
That to me I feel like they were like, okay, let's take your classic bank robbery scene in a movie, and in every bank robbery scene, they're gonna have the one part where something goes sideways and they have to make a difficult decision, and now like the plan has gone awry. So I felt like that was very similar the way that it was written, in that the plan was supposed to be easy, get in, get out, and then obviously things go sideways. And I thought it was a really great way to make the story of her escape have a little bit more tension, increase the stakes. You just didn't know what was going to happen. And for me, the significance of that scene, of that escape, was to show that the rebellion is more real than it appears to be in the movies. Right? In the movies, you just have, oh yeah, you know, you have the Rebel Alliance and the Empire, and they're just gonna fight, like whoop de doo. But this is showing like what it takes at the ground level to actually get a rebellion started, and how dangerous it is when you're faced against an authoritarian government.
Mhm.
So I thought that was really, really cool that they decided to do that, and then also that it reflected kind of your stereotypical like bank robbery scene, and something's gonna go wrong on the way out.
Yeah, they do a really good
What
job
I
of.
mean, do you agree with that?
No, I definitely agree with you. I think they do a really good job of making you feel the things that are at risk in this getaway scene, even though realistically they're walking the whole time. There's like no scene where Mon Mothma is like, she's never actually running, right? So like, how do you take a getaway scene where essentially the person you're trying to get away can really only walk the whole time, right? And so they add the element of like, they sort of do this little buildup of like, do you trust all these people that Luthen's brought into his team to save her,
Mhm.
right? And it, as it turns
Yeah,
out, there was an ISB plant in one of them, right? Like,
yeah.
who do you trust,
But
right?
that's the thing that I like. At first, when I first watched it, I was like, I don't understand like where Luthen is getting this from. Like, why does he think that Bail Organa's team has a plant that's going to end up betraying the whole thing, right? Like, it didn't make sense. But then it occurs to me, I was like, you know what? What a great way to include the audience as part of Mon Mothma's experience, because Mon Mothma has nothing to go off of. She trusts Bale, she trusts Luthen.
Mhm.
She's a little bit reserved about both, but okay, so option A, option B, which one do I take? I don't know. So as the audience, since Luthen didn't present us as the audience any proof, we are also empathetic with Mon Mothma. We're like, I mean, is Luthen making this up? Is he just trying to kill her too? Like, who knows, right? So I thought that was really good storytelling in the way they revealed that. And of course you're rooting for Andor, right? So you have no reason not to trust him,
Yeah.
but you also have Erskine the driver, who you just barely found out is a Luthen spy. So you do have that wild card even for the audience. We're like, I mean, Erskine could be part of the problem, right? Like, who knows?
Yeah, they do a really good job of like keeping us like questioning like, oh my gosh, who's on her side, right? But it also
Yeah,
kind of shows you how fragile and brittle things can be when you have espionage going on, right? All it takes
yeah,
is one person next to Mon Mothma who is on the bad side to just shoot her and then she's dead, right? And then there goes
right.
a significant piece in your rebellion. So uh rebellions can be very fragile, similar to the contrast here is also like empires are super fragile, right? And
Oh yeah, a hundred percent.
we have this overarching theme of the fragility of these systems that people are trying to build and maintain throughout the entire season. So it's really cool to see that. Yeah, certainly. I'll say it wasn't like the most like gripping getaway scene. Like I wasn't like freaking out the whole time. Partially because we know that obviously we know that both Andor and Mon Mothma make it to Yavin, right? Like because we see her in Rogue One, right? Like we know that she's alive. We know Andor's alive. So the stakes are a little bit less, but it still gave me that feeling of like urgency. Like oh my gosh, this is like kind of I'm like really worried for her, even though I know that she comes out alive. And I think that's an overarching theme of Andor as well as a lot of Star Wars movies is you kind of know how things end up, but how do you make it
Yeah.
so that even though the audience knows how things end up, how do you make it exciting for them, right? And they do such an
Well,
amazing
I
job of that.
this may be one of those times where Rogue One kind of requires you to know the Easter eggs or the other projects in order to help the stakes. So I don't know if you realize this. I certainly did until I started watching some Easter egg videos. But in the Clone Wars series, I believe, or in the Rebel series. No, it's in the. I'm sorry, it's in the Rebel season. So it's an animated show that takes place also just before A New Hope.
Mhm.
They talk about how Gold Squadron took Mon Mothma to Yavin, right? So presumably that is Bail Organa's team, or it was supposed to be, right? So that's the story before Andor. And so now that we're watching Andor, we're like, wait a minute, if Andor is rescuing Mon Mothma, then that's not Gold Squadron. So I think maybe that's why you have this kind of like option A, option B, because the audience is almost expecting Bail Organa to do it because of Gold Squadron.
Mhm.
But if you're new to Star Wars and you haven't seen Rebels, I personally have not seen Rebels, then how would you know that, right? Like how would you know that, wait a minute, in the greater story, we know that Gold Squadron took Mon Mothma and Andor is not part of Gold Squadron. And as a matter of fact, they address that pretty much as soon as they get to Yavin. They're like, yeah, so we're gonna have to tell everybody that Gold Squadron did it and give them credit, even though it was you. So as I was watching the show, like I understood that plot wise they needed to give Gold Squadron credit, right? To help explain why that was supposedly the case in Rebels, in the show Rebels. But from just a narrative perspective, it didn't make a whole lot of sense why they were eager to give Gold Squadron credit. Like, why was that necessary?
Mm.
I'd love to ask you. I've got a theory, but I'd love to hear if you have any like
So
ideas or reasons why.
so I'll tell you, I've seen Rebels twice. Love Rebels. Super emotionally gripping as well. I do not remember that part where Gold Squadron is the one that that brings Mon Mothma. My guess would be that there's this whole tension with uh Cassian Andor on Yavin, and
Mhm.
I guess without like rewatching the scene or whatnot, perhaps there's something else in the scene that explains it better. But my initial reaction is he had taken this, he'd like quote unquote gone on this like test flight, right? Or like he wasn't really authorized to like just fly off and do Luthen's mission. And I think it feeds into the
Mhm.
whole narrative of like, hey, you know, Luthen helped build this rebel alliance, but he's really kind of like a rogue agent at this point, right? Like we don't take orders
Right.
from Luthen. When he randomly calls you Cassian Andor, you should not, you like you need to go up the chain of command correctly to accept the mission. Like you
Right.
don't just go off on your own and do things. And so they convey this sort of thing where like it could be any random person like flying, like we can't have what do they call it, like just like like people going off flying to and from
Right.
Yavin by themselves.
There's a chain of command,
Yeah.
right? This is an organized military force, not some sort of, band of cowboys going on an insurgency. So
Hmm.
I get that. If that's the reason, then sure. I just don't think it was communicated very well.
Mm.
I kind of had to make that assumption for myself. Like I think that's why, but then that brings up the other question, right? I don't know that they did a good job of explaining why Luthen was at odds with the Rebel Alliance, because then to kind of further that point, Clea pretty much refuses to leave Coruscant with Andor. And I was like, why do you want to stay? Like, why are you so afraid of the Rebel Alliance that that's not what you want to do? So I don't know. Do you have any um I don't know, any reason why that was the case, or do you see it differently?
Yeah, I think I do partially agree with you. I think there is like from the audience, they're trying to like imply to us that there's some I guess tensions that grew over time between the Luthen Clea faction and then the Yavin faction, right? Obviously, like this
Mhm.
whole season plays over the period of like 3 to 4 years, and like a
Mhm.
lot of things changed during that time. I don't think they don't really. I would agree that they don't really pinpoint a specific like, oh, maybe like if they could have said like, oh, Luthen, you know, there was a mission that Luthen sent one of our squads on, and then they ended up dying, And he was like, and then
Mm-hmm.
he just told us that's the price you pay for the rebellion. And so we're like kind of pissed at him now
Right.
because he did that, right? And we're not willing to like lose people. Like if they had said something like that, it probably would have been more forefront. It probably would have been explained a lot better. But they don't. Yeah,
Right.
there's no one thing where I'm like, oh, this is why Luthen and the Rebel Alliance on Yavin are kind of not on the same page, or not,
Right.
not on good terms.
Because I think, like, while they also don't explain that as much with Saw, I think there was enough background in Andor season 1 to understand that he's more of like a terrorist,
Hmm.
right? So I get why that is a separate faction, and he's also like super neurotic and paranoid. So
Yeah,
like I get that.
yeah.
But with Luthen and the Rebel Alliance, I was like, it's kind of weird, and not to harp on them too much, but just to kind of further the point even more, there is a scene where Luthen yells at Clay and says, "Listen, there are so many messages, there's so many signals, we don't know what's what, right?" And I was like, well, is there? I mean, your only dude is Andor. Like you're only sending him on missions. Like, what are all these messages you're talking about? And I think while it's implied, it would have been nice to see a moment where Clea and Luthen are discussing all their intel, and they can't even agree on what's real, what's important, and like within that mess of things, maybe they see something like Project Stardust and they completely disregard it because it's among a bunch of other cool sounding project names, and it's like I don't know what this is. And so then that leads into that scene where Luthen like there's stop all the radio traffic. Like
Hmm.
it's so silly that we're collecting so much intel, we have no idea what to do with it. Like I think that would help explain it as opposed to imply it. So I
Yeah.
and I think it's and if I think if you tie that into one of the reasons why the Rebel Alliance wants to get Luthen to kind of toe the line and he's not, it would help make a little bit more sense of why there's that schism between the two.
Yeah, I think over time we do, as the audience, we do start to forget that, Luthen has a lot of people in his network, right? Even
Yeah,
though like eventually it really just seems like to us that it's just like he's only sending Andor on missions, right? But like obviously like he's
right.
got a larger network, but I think that network does shrink over time up until episode 12, obviously, where it
The,
probably is no one
the
besides
only
him and Clea.
thing the only thing they had to do, right? Well, this is a lot easier said, right? This is armchair quarterbacking, right? Like if Luthen and Andor are meeting, it, under a bridge or something like that, some clandestine location, all he has to do is Andor's walking in, some other agent is walking out. And Andor kind of looks at him and like, who the heck was that? Oh, don't worry about him. Like then he's actually pulling multiple strings. Or same thing, like, hey, how come you didn't answer the radios? Like, give me a sec, I'm on the other line. Yeah. Execute the mission. Go ahead. All right, Andor, what do you need? Like if they would have included something like that, I think it would have shown that he's got his hands on multiple reins and they're all pulling in different directions because he's got a web of spies and insurgents all across the galaxy.
I think this is one of the examples where they probably opted to have the dialogue of the character tell it to you rather than show it to you. And certainly, like I think in
Yeah,
storytelling, you want to opt for the like show the audience something as opposed to just like outright say it. Um,
yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, that was yeah, we start to not like feel like his network is as large as time goes on because they kind of focus
Yeah.
more deeply into. I would not be surprised if they had it in the script but had to cut it because these last few episodes are
That's
pretty
true.
long, right?
That's
And they
true.
were probably having to. They probably had a lot of stuff on the cutting room floor that they had to get rid of that filled in some of the details that perhaps we're talking about here.
So then, my last question for you is this: why, after the speech that Mon Mothma gives at the Senate, why does Bail Organa say, "Oh, Yavin isn't ready. I need to stay on Coruscant"? Like, I I don't understand what his reasoning is, right? Oh, and while we're on that, so last question and also second to last question: where the heck is Senator Leia Organa? At this point, she is a senator, right?
Yes.
So I leave those two questions to you. Why did Bale say Yavin's not ready and he needs to stay? And where the heck is Leia?
So overall, I am. It was good for me to see Bale in this series, but I am either confused and or don't really remember like his path and like what his priorities are at any one point in time. Because I too
Mhm.
was confused when she was like, "Come with me to Yavin," and then he's like, I still have stuff here to do." It might be a timeline thing where it's like, oh, in some other story, like he's still in the Senate at this time, but then in the very last episode, I believe he's on Yavin. So I'm like, okay, he's here now on Yavin. Is he here permanently or is he here temporarily? Like, what's the situation, right? Like, is he still in
Yeah,
the Senate? Like, has he
I think
been
that
kicked out of the Senate? I don't know.
that could have used some more explanation for sure.
I think so, but I also feel like it's probably less important to the whole thing. I could see why they added the whole like, oh, like if Mon Mothma just left Bale without saying "Come with me to Yavin," it would have seemed weird. But then I guess the less weird but still weird situation is what she did, where he was like, "No, I still need to stay here" or something like that. Um,
Yeah,
so I think they probably did the best that they could, but overall, I want to say I am certainly confused by like what like Bale's timeline is for joining the Rebel Alliance and
hmm
what he's like he's certainly doing stuff to help the Rebel Alliance. Like we see a little bits of that here and there, but I don't see the full story of him and like I am confused by that, but I also understand that they chose to use the screen time to focus on the characters that actually
yeah.
matter. And so
And
I'm not
and to be
too
honest, you're
bothered by
right.
it.
He didn't matter. Like he's not one of the characters that had a story arc. He didn't
Mhm.
have character development. Bale was Bale the entire time. Same thing with Krennic. Krennic did not develop in any way. I think he was just a necessary piece to help the other characters revolve around,
Yeah.
right? Mon Mothma had development, Deidre, Cyril, Andor, they all did. But yeah, but
I actually want
okay.
to.
Well, hey, like
Yeah.
I
Sorry. Go
go
ahead.
ahead. That ends my questions. I'm curious to see if you have any questions or any closing thoughts.
Well, the main thing is, while I do agree, the show's called Andor. I do agree that Andor had character development. I want to say there were five characters that had more character development than Andor. Actually, probably six characters. Five of them being female,
Okay.
right? So like Dedra, Bix. Uh,
Yes.
well, I guess
Yes.
Clea's development is kind of like mostly at the end. Um, but Mon Mothma and Vel, like those five females had really really star roles, and they're really prominently displayed in the very last scenes
Yeah.
of the last
Well.
episode. And then Cyril, I think, also
Yeah.
had excellent character development all around. Like again, like many of the characters that they spent time focusing on were really well written.
Yeah.
Really love their stories.
Well, maybe I need to define like what I mean by character development because in this series, I would not say that Vel or Clea had any character development.
Hmm.
Their values were not questioned. They did not have to change the way they did things or the way they viewed the world, right? Whereas Deidre, Cyril, Bix absolutely did. Now, my prediction about Bix, like kind of doing like a dark side turn, was totally
You
wrong.
thought she was gonna.
As a matter of fact, I think she went the opposite way. I think she killed Dr. Gorse. It was like, okay, I am a good guy now.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean that
um,
was that was also
but
surprising for me.
But yeah, but I do agree with you that they had more character development than Andor. I think Andor's character development largely happened off screen, which is kind of a disservice to Diego Luna because he really did a great job with the show. Meaning, I think Andor came to better define his priorities and what he wanted in the time jumps,
Mhm.
right? Because he was trying to get away from Luthen. Then he was dedicated to Luthen. Then he was trying to get over to the Rebel or not fight for the Rebel Alliance. Then he is in the Rebel Alliance. So like a lot of those changes are happening off screen. Um, but I do still think that you can see that Andor at episode 1 is not the same Andor at episode 12.
Yeah, his
I think
priorities and his understanding of his place in the universe does change. I just
Correct.
want to say there was one episode, right? The episode where Bix leaves him, and then next episode we see him playing with Melshi and K2SO in his house, and they're like super happy and whatnots, right? So it's like, yeah, like that 1 year time skip where like, oh, like he's already mostly over her, right? Like he's there was no like, I guess no like super like long emphasis on his sadness of Bix leaving, but we kind of focus on like this is a thing that needs to happen for him.
Yeah. But I think that's being a little judgmental, like, because you're seeing it from the perspective of, I just saw you go through this tragic thing last episode, and then this episode you seem fine. But remember, for him, it's been a whole year. Like, he's had time to process his emotions. And you can see later on when Vel comes to talk to him, he's like, "You should go find Bix."
Mhm.
He's like, "No,
Like
no,
no, it's not the right time, right? Yeah.
it's not the right time," which is really, really tragic because we all know that he doesn't make it after that,
Yeah.
and I do wonder what happens to Bix and their son, which was a real weird plot twist. But I was like, oh man, that's so sad.
It's the rule of whenever two characters have sex at any point, they're gonna have a baby. That's what's
Is
gonna
that how it
happen.
works? I didn't know. We should do a podcast just on that.
Well,
I feel like I'm learning so
well,
much.
obviously, like they were together for a while, but it's like there's so
Yeah.
many shows where it's like, oh, these two characters had sex once, and then like time skip, oh, they have a baby, like even though they had sex one time, like it's kind of a trope at this point, right? In a lot of shows, but
Yeah, yeah, that's
anyways,
true.
come back to Andor. Yeah, so like, um, yeah, I would agree that a lot of his development comes, it's like less blatant, right? Like it's more off screen
Correct.
and it's more through his interactions with other people as opposed to seeing
100%.
it outright
Yeah.
from him. But
And I think Bix, more than anything, was his driving motivation for his development.
mhm,
He had to go rescue her. He had to deal with her traumas and addictions and nightmares, and then he had to find her a safe place to live, which is how they ended up on Yavin.
mhm.
um, and then finally she tells him, like, hey, listen, it you have a mission that you need to uphold, and so I'm going to leave. And that was a huge sacrifice for her to take. It, to me, it kind of caught me off guard, but I was like, wow, like, I mean, what a gamble, because she doesn't know how he's going to react. Like, maybe he decides to say, screw the mission and go find her. But that's why she left him with zero clues, you know? So I thought that was really tragic, but also very profound decision.
Yeah, I think it was well written. I will just say the the weird part is like of all the places that he would start searching, I feel like it's got to be here, right? Like you would think
Well,
the
I
list of
mean,
places is pretty short, and the fact that she's back at where they were together after they left Ferrex, I'm like, okay,
well,
that's kind of
okay. So just think about this though, right? If Andor has done such a great job of reflecting on previous story points and other characters, think about Darth Vader and the fact that he never visited Tatooine to go find Luke, because he
yeah,
was so traumatized by that place. He's like, I'm not going there, and that should have been the first place he looked, but no, he didn't. Right. So maybe this is the polar opposite, where Bick says, "Listen, I was assaulted on this planet, and my friend Brasso died here on this planet, but I have overcome those fears and those traumas. And this is a planet of agriculture. So it's a planet of life. We give life to the rest of the universe." And so I think it was very poetic for her to go back there, whereas somebody like Anakin Skywalker was not willing to go back to Tatooine.
yeah. To be fair, like I don't know where else she would have ended up. It's either some random place that we haven't seen before or here, right? And it does make sense that it shows a bit of like character growth that she's able to come back here and live what looks to be a happy life, even though she has bad memories of being here the last
To
time
be
she was
honest, I
there.
think it would have been really funny if she just stayed on Yavin 4, but had one of those like plastic glasses with the mustache.
Yeah.
And she's just like walking around the background, and Andor's like, I don't know who that is.
Yeah, that would be funny. I don't know if That would have fit the storyline. But yeah, I mean, I always wonder, like, is she just still on Yavin, but like at some other base on the other side of the planet? You know, like.
Right. I mean, I think it would have been even more tragic if they would have put her on Alderaan. Because then
Oh,
she would have died.
and then she dies shortly after. I guess shortly after. It would have been, wait, how shortly after? It would have been pretty soon after Andor
Oh,
died
because
then,
think
right?
about it. Right, because they blow up Jeddah, right? Or Scarif. Yeah,
Uh,
they blow up Scarif. And then they pursue Leia. She gets captured. They take her out to the Death Star, and then Governor Tarkin's like, "Watch what this Death Star can do," and he blows up Alderaan.
yeah, so it's got to be within
Like
the
that's
same
what.
few days.
Yeah, that'd be pretty quick. So, I mean, I know I shouldn't laugh because that's pretty sad, but I think it would have been kind of funny if they're like, "Oh yeah, she escaped to Alderaan. Well, she'll be safe forever." Right.
Yeah.
Oh man,
All right, we're
this
coming
is
up on
why
an
they won't
hour
let me
here.
write.
Any,
This is why they won't let me write into the writing room.
you can write the meme version of Star Wars.
All
Any
right, and
closing thoughts or anything else that we should touch upon before we close out here?
yeah, listen, I'm not sure what our next podcast is going to be about, but I'm excited for it. So let's do that. But also, Andor was really fantastic. Disney, for the love of God, please keep making more shows like this. Like they're character focused, their story ahead of Easter eggs, right? Like I am not complaining that we didn't have a Darth Vader cameo or an Ahsoka cameo or a Mando cameo. We didn't talk about Emperor Palpatine cloning himself. Thank God. Like just so let's have more of that. Like I don't need those Easter eggs. Just make really good shows like this and allow the writers to really express themselves and try new things, right? So I want more of that. So, whether it's Star Wars or Marvel, let's just focus on the story. Like make a really good story. And it could work on its own. I mean, Andor, I know at the beginning I said Andor kind of needs some of that other Star Wars context to work, but truthfully, Star Wars is such a cultural thing that most of us know of it or have seen it, so it's fine. I think Andor is a really good show. It works pretty well on its own, and it's really compelling storytelling. So that's my closing thoughts. Thanks so much, B, for hanging out with me. What are your closing thoughts?
Same thing. Super highly rated show. Again, I said it might be one of my favorite top five favorite shows of all time. The ratings show it, and really love the series. And I really enjoyed talking about it with you, Jorge. It was a good time. Always interesting to see our matching as well as our competing viewpoints and trying to understand how we see this world as both of us being pretty, well, I don't want to say big Star Wars fans because then the actual Star Wars fans will come out here and get mad at us for being fakes.
No, that's
But
okay.
we
Let them get
we
mad.
we we enjoy the Star Wars universe and the stories, and it's certainly my favorite Star Wars show. And yeah, Disney just needs to keep investing in shows like this one, right? So yeah, same thing as you, Jorge. Was really happy to watch it, happy to discuss it. Yeah, like Jorge said, we don't know what we'll talk about next, but we'll try and figure out. It might be something Marvel related, TBD. We'll figure that out.
If you made it this far in the podcast, you should totally leave a comment down below.
depending on
Send us
what
a question. Give
depending on
us your
what
two
platform you're on.
thoughts.
I don't know if you can leave
Yeah,
comments on
that's true.
Spotify podcasts. I need to look into that.
Text us. Hey, I made it to the end of the show, and here's your text.
All right, we'll
All
share
right.
Jorge's
Thanks for
phone
joining
number.
the Desert Rat Real Chat. We'll catch you next time.
All right, bye.